Jacques Cousteau's story didn't begin on the deck of a famous research vessel or in the depths of the ocean. It started somewhere much simpler, with a young boy who was endlessly curious but had no idea that the sea would one day define his entire life. How did his fascination with the sea begin? Cousteau was not born into a maritime family. He did not grow up surrounded by sailors, captains, naval officers, or divers. In fact, his early interests were surprisingly different from what would later make him a global icon. As a child, he was fascinated by mechanics, movement, and how things worked. He spent hours taking apart toys, clocks, and anything made of gears. But his first real obsession wasn't the ocean, it was the camera. When he was around 11 years old, he saved every small coin he could find, every bit of allowance he was given, until he finally had enough to buy a tiny film camera. It was nothing special. It wasn't expensive. It wasn't even very good. But it changed everything. He carried it everywhere. Forests, city streets, riversides, recording small moments and studying them at home. This early love for filmmaking is what slowly opened the door to exploration. Through the camera, Cousteau didn't just look at the world. He examined it. He studied details most kids his age ignored. He learned how light behaved, how movement told a story, and how to observe patiently. He didn't know it yet, but that patience would become essential years later when he waited for rare creatures to appear in the deep ocean. At this point, he still had no particular love for the sea. He admired water, yes, especially the rivers near his home, but he wasn't dreaming of underwater adventures. Not yet. What was his childhood like? Cousteau grew up in a cultured family, not wealthy, but well-educated and supportive. His parents encouraged reading, travel, and curiosity. They didn't push him in any direction. Instead, they allowed him to explore whatever interested him at the time. He spent much of his early life near the Rhine River, and this environment shaped him more than he realized. The sound of flowing water, the calmness of riversides, and the reflective surfaces of still ponds fascinated him. He would throw stones and watch the ripples spread, studying how circles expanded and disappeared. Again, he didn't see this as science or exploration, but it was. He also wasn't the quiet, disciplined boy people imagine when they think of a future explorer. He was energetic, mischievous, always moving, always trying something new. Teachers sometimes called him distracted. His parents called him imaginative. But he had one defining trait. He was endlessly curious. If something caught his attention, he would follow it until he understood it fully. And although his family didn't include sailors, they did love traveling. They moved often, bringing young Jacques to different coastal towns in France. He saw harbors filled with ships and fishermen sorting their nets. He didn't understand these worlds, but he was drawn to them, even without knowing why. Were there any sailors in his family? Surprisingly, no. Cousteau had no seafaring heritage at all. No uncles who were captains. No grandparents who were fishermen. No cousins who served in the Navy. Nothing in his background suggested that he would ever become an explorer of the ocean. And this is what makes his story so unique. Cousteau was not following family tradition. He was not stepping into a path already laid out for him. He was carving a brand new one. Everything he became, he built from curiosity, circumstance, and choice, not inheritance. What was his first real connection to the sea? His first meaningful encounter with the ocean came through a friend. Cousteau was still young, energetic, and more interested in machines than water. But one day a friend encouraged him to try swimming properly, not just wading or splashing. At first he resisted. He wasn't confident in his strength and didn't particularly care for swimming, But he eventually agreed. The moment he slipped beneath the surface, something clicked. He didn't feel fear. He felt wonder. The world underwater was silent, slow, and strangely peaceful. Light behaved differently. Movements felt softer. Sounds were muted. He later said this moment wasn't dramatic or life-changing yet, but it planted a seed. He realized the world below the surface was not the same as the one above. It had depth, mystery, and meaning. Still, he didn't pursue it seriously. It was just a moment, a memory. His real path would begin years later, in a way no one expected. The turning point that changed everything. As a young adult, Cousteau wanted to be something entirely different, a naval aviator, a pilot. He loved speed, machines, wind, height, everything opposite of the deep sea. He trained hard and showed promise. He imagined his future in the sky, not underwater. Then everything changed because of a single accident. Cousteau was involved in a serious car crash that broke both of his arms. The recovery was long and painful. He was forced to stop almost everything, moving fast, flying, physical training. Doctors told him he would never be able to fly again. For a young man who had shaped his future around aviation, this felt like the end of everything. He struggled emotionally. His dreams had collapsed in an instant. But as part of his physical therapy, his doctors recommended something unusual. Swimming. At first he resisted. But when he finally returned to the water, the same world he had briefly admired years earlier, something felt right. He began swimming more often, getting stronger, but also rediscovering that quiet underwater world. The accident that ruined one dream gave birth to another. While recovering, he began experimenting with holding his breath underwater and observing life below the surface. His curiosity reignited. He started filming underwater with modified equipment. Soon he was diving as often as possible. This moment, born from pain and recovery, is often cited as the true turning point of his life. How did this lead to a life of exploration? Cousteau began spending time with naval officers and amateur divers. He watched how equipment worked, how early goggles and breathing devices functioned, and how limited they were. He wondered if they could be improved. With his mechanical curiosity, his filmmaking background, and his new fascination with underwater exploration, he began building and modifying gear. He tested prototypes, adjusted valves, and experimented with breathing systems. He wasn't just diving, he was innovating. Soon, he collaborated with Emil Gagnon to create the Aqua Lung, the world's first modern scuba system. It changed everything. Now he could stay underwater longer, explore deeper, and film what no one else had ever captured. A child obsessed with cameras, mechanics, and small experiments had suddenly become a pioneer. What does this tell us about Cousteau's character? More than anything, his early life shows that he was not destined for the sea. He chose it. He was resilient. He turned a devastating accident into a new beginning. He approached the ocean not as a sailor, but as a curious thinker. His filmmaking background let him show underwater life to the entire world. He didn't inherit his path, he created it. Cousteau's childhood wasn't about waves or ships. It was about curiosity, patience, creativity, and recovery. These qualities shaped the explorer he would become. Why does his story still inspire people today? Because it's real. Because it's imperfect. Because it's human. Cousteau wasn't pushed into greatness. He stumbled into it. He adapted to it. And he embraced it fully. His early years remind us that a future doesn't need to be obvious from the start. Sometimes it builds itself through chance, curiosity, and resilience. The boy who bought a small camera with saved pocket Money would one day film the depths of the world's oceans. The young man who wanted to fly planes would instead explore the mysteries of the deep. The accident that nearly ended his dreams gave birth to new ones, and that is how Jacques Cousteau truly began.